Some families carry secrets so dark that even time cannot bury them. The Ashford family is one of them, and their story will make you question every shadow in an old house. Their history is filled with unexplained tragedies and mysterious disappearances that have left a mark on everyone who has ever come near their estate. From the towering halls of their mansion to the hidden rooms no one dares to enter, there is an air of fear and curiosity that clings to the family like a shadow. For generations, people have whispered about what truly happened behind those walls, tales of sorrow and terror that are passed down in hushed voices. Yet despite all the rumors and stories, no one has ever uncovered the full truth, and the mansion still stands silent, waiting as if it remembers everything that has ever occurred within its walls. And even now, the secrets of the Ashford family continue to haunt the minds of those who dare to imagine the darkness that may still linger there. The Ashfords were once one of the wealthiest and most respected families in their town. Their name carried weight and admiration, and their influence stretched far beyond the village limits. They lived in a mansion that stood perched on a hill, so high that it could be seen from almost every corner of the town. Its towering walls and sprawling gardens gave the impression of grandeur and power, and from a distance it looked like a fortress, a place where only the most privileged could belong. The mansion loomed over the village like a silent guardian, as if it were keeping watch over everything and everyone beneath it. The villagers often spoke of its size and beauty, of the intricate carvings on the doors and windows, and the way the evening sunlight would catch the glass and make it glimmer like fire. But while the outside was magnificent, the inside held secrets that no visitor could ever fully understand. The Ashfords carried themselves with a dignity and poise that inspired respect. But there was a quiet unease about them, a sense that behind their composed appearances, something darker lingered. The family was known for their lavish parties, their extravagant dinners, and their generosity to the town. Yet even in these public displays of wealth, there were moments that unsettled those who attended. Some said that the laughter at their gatherings was too loud, too forced, as if hiding some inner tension. Others claimed to have glimpsed figures in the hallways that disappeared the moment anyone turned to look. Some visitors noticed that certain rooms were always kept locked, or that shadows seemed to move against the light with a will of their own. The servants spoke in whispers about things they did not understand, noises that could not be explained, and objects that seemed to shift from one place to another without reason. These small details combined to create a growing sense of unease that the Ashfords were not like other families that lived in the town, despite their reputation and outward appearance of control. The Ashfords were not immune to tragedy. Children died young, sometimes mysteriously, sometimes in accidents that seemed far too coincidental to be ignored. Some servants disappeared, leaving only rumors behind, and even pets were said to vanish from the estate without explanation. The villagers began to notice patterns that could not be ignored, and stories of curses and misfortune began to attach themselves to the family name. Every new misfortune added to the legend that the Ashfords were followed by something unseen, something relentless and unyielding. Their wealth could not protect them from the whispers that grew louder with every passing year, nor could it shield them from the questions that no one dared to ask aloud. The mansion itself became a symbol of both awe and fear. Its high towers and long-shadowed corridors suggested stories of grandeur, but also of confinement, hidden passageways and locked doors that no one outside the family was allowed to open. The gardens were perfectly trimmed and expansive, but even they could not hide the sense of isolation that hung over the property. At night, the mansion appeared even more formidable, the windows reflecting moonlight like watchful eyes, and the silhouette of its towers cutting through the dark sky like the fingers of some unseen guardian. The locals would often glance at it from afar and shiver, wondering what secrets it held and who had suffered within. Its walls, inside the Ashford home, the family moved with a rhythm all their own. The children were taught etiquette and knowledge, but also trained to observe and not speak of what they saw. The adults maintained a strict discipline and a sense of secrecy that extended to all aspects of life. Visitors often felt as if they had stepped into a different world, a world where the normal rules did not apply, and where something invisible controlled the pace of every interaction. Every hallway seemed longer than it should be, every room colder than expected, and every glance seemed to hold a hidden meaning that was only understood by those born into the family. Rumors of hidden treasures and secret rooms circulated among the townspeople, and adventurers occasionally attempted to explore the mansion, only to return shaken and unwilling to speak of what they had found. The mansion seemed to protect its secrets, as if it were aware of the outside world, but not willing to allow anyone access its walls, absorbed the whispers of servants, children, and visitors alike, and carried them through the corridors in a way that made even the bravest heart race with fear. The Ashfords themselves were aware of these stories and never denied them. Instead, they moved with a calm and measured presence that suggested they had accepted that some things were better left unknown. Even with all this, the Ashfords remained influential. Their wealth and status allowed them to maintain their position in town, and for many years no one dared to challenge them. Yet the combination of privilege and secrecy created a tension that never fully dissipated. Every success was shadowed by a tragedy, every smile by a suspicion, and every public appearance by a private fear. It was this duality that defined the family that made them both respected and feared, and ensured that their name would continue to be remembered long after the events that shaped them had passed. The Ashfords were a family of contradictions, celebrated and shunned, admired and whispered about their mansion, a monument to both power and darkness. Their lives were intertwined with the very fabric of the town, yet also separate from it, as if they existed on a parallel plane where ordinary rules did not apply. What happened within the walls of their home remains a question that many have pondered, a mystery that continues to linger in the shadows of their once magnificent estate, and in the memories of those who dared to look too closely. The Ashfords were more than just a wealthy family. They were a symbol of what wealth and secrecy can create, a mixture of awe and fear that leaves an indelible mark on everyone who encounters it. Their story is not one of simple fortune or misfortune, but of the complex interplay between public respect and private terror, and it is this complexity that has allowed their legend to endure across generations and continues to make people wonder what lies behind the grand facades and the silent halls of their imposing mansion. From the very beginning, the Ashfords' lives were marked by sorrow and misfortune, as if some unseen force had chosen their family to bear a burden that no one else could understand. Children and servants vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of unease. Among the villagers, the stories of disappearances became the topic of hushed conversations, as people speculated about what could have possibly happened to those who entered the mansion and never returned. Accidents claimed loved ones in ways that were far too strange to be mere coincidence. Sometimes a child would fall from a high window, or a horse would bolt, suddenly taking someone with it, and at other times a servant would be found unconscious in a locked room with no explanation for how they got there. The pattern of tragedies seemed unbroken and relentless, creating an atmosphere of fear that settled over the estate like a thick fog. The mansion itself seemed to respond to these misfortunes, its corridors echoing with sounds that no one could explain, and its shadows growing longer and darker with every new incident. The villagers began to whisper that the family was cursed, a belief that grew stronger with each passing year and each unexplained disappearance. No one dared approach the estate after sunset, and even during the day, there was a palpable tension that could be felt, when looking toward the hill where the mansion stood. Tall walls and towering spires that once inspired awe now seemed menacing and oppressive, and the beauty of the gardens could not hide the sense of dread that hung over the place like a shroud. Every untimely death added to the aura of fear that clung to the mansion and to the family itself. The Ashfords carried themselves with a composed exterior, but those closest to them knew that sorrow ran deep within their veins. Their eyes held secrets, and glances exchanged in private seemed to speak of events too terrible to recount. The servants who remained whispered among themselves about noises that woke them in the middle of the night, doors that opened and closed on their own, and the occasional fleeting glimpse of figures that vanished when approached. The house seemed alive in ways that could not be explained, moving with a rhythm that was both deliberate and unsettling, as if it were aware of the tragedies that unfolded within. Locals told stories of how on certain nights lights would flicker in rooms that were supposed to be empty, and strange shadows would cross the windows as if the past itself were trying to communicate with the living. Some claimed to have seen the spirits of lost children wandering the halls of the mansion, calling out for attention that no one could provide. Others spoke of servants who had been found in strange states of panic, unable to speak coherently about what they had seen or heard. It was as though the mansion had absorbed every act of sorrow, every disappearance, and every accident, and kept them alive in the very fabric of its walls, creating an invisible web that connected past and present in ways that could not be untangled. Rumors of curses spread like wildfire through the town, and the Ashfords became a subject of fascination and fear in equal measure. People spoke of the family in hushed tones, children were warned to stay away, and travelers avoided the hill altogether. The combination of wealth and secrecy only added to the legend, making it difficult for anyone to separate truth from imagination. Every new incident reinforced the idea that the Ashfords were somehow touched by a force beyond human understanding, and that their lives were destined to be entwined with misfortune. The family themselves were burdened by these events. Their grief was profound, and their attempts to live normal lives were constantly interrupted by fresh tragedies. Every new generation faced similar misfortunes, as if the curse or dark force that haunted them passed down like an invisible heirloom. The children grew up aware of the stories surrounding their family, and were often taught to navigate the mansion and their lives carefully to avoid attracting attention from whatever unseen entity seemed to linger. Always watching, always waiting to manifest in ways that brought fear and sorrow to all who dwelled within the estate. Even the bravest townsfolk hesitated to approach the mansion, as if the mere presence of the estate exuded a warning. They would glance at it from afar, feeling a chill run down their spine and often whispering prayers to keep the darkness at bay. Stories of accidents and disappearances were recounted to new generations as cautionary tales, and the legend of the Ashfords grew larger with every retelling. Their mansion became a symbol not just of wealth and power, but of fear of the unknown and of the tragedies that had accumulated over decades in ways that could never be fully explained. The Ashfords were no longer simply a family. They had become a force of legend, a representation of sorrow and mystery intertwined. Their lives, marked by loss and disappearance, were a constant reminder that some lineages carry burdens that cannot be escaped, and that some houses hold within them the echoes of every tragedy that has ever occurred within their walls. The mansion itself became a character in the story, a silent witness to every accident, every vanished child, and every servant who disappeared without a trace. And through it all, the aura of fear remained as strong as ever, enveloping the family and the town alike in a web of whispered horror and unanswerable questions. The heir to the Ashford estate was a child unlike any other. From the moment he was born, he carried an air of peculiarity that both fascinated and frightened those around him. His habits were strange and unpredictable, and even the most seasoned servants found themselves unsettled by his behavior. He wandered the halls of the mansion at night, often speaking to shadows, as if they were old friends, and listening intently, as if they whispered secrets back to him. The walls of the estate echoed with his soft footsteps and the faint murmur of words that no one else could understand. It was as though he existed partly in the world everyone else knew, and partly in a realm only he could perceive. His days were no less strange than his nights. He spent hours alone in dimly lit rooms poring over books that seemed ancient and foreign. His journals were filled with cryptic writings, lines and symbols that defied understanding, and drawings that appeared to shift meaning depending on the angle from which they were viewed. No outsider could make sense of them, and even the family itself often hesitated to ask questions for fear of provoking his anger or unsettling whatever force seemed to accompany him. The townspeople whispered that the child was special, gifted, or cursed, depending on who was telling the story, and that the darkness that had haunted the Ashfords for generations had finally found a voice through him. The boy's presence affected everyone in the mansion. Servants and family alike found themselves walking on eggshells around him, as if a single misstep could awaken something terrible. He spoke rarely to adults, and when he did, his words were strange, sometimes prophetic and often disturbing. Some visitors claimed to have glimpsed him standing in the shadows of doorways with eyes that seemed far older than his years, and a gaze that pierced right through the soul. The atmosphere of the mansion shifted in his presence, as though the walls themselves recognized him as different, and the air seemed heavier, somehow charged with energy that no one could explain. The child's affinity for the dark corners of the estate was uncanny. He would spend hours in rooms, long abandoned rooms that even the servants dared not enter. He explored attics and basements, hidden stairways and sealed chambers, seemingly drawn to places that were rich with history and mystery. The servants whispered among themselves that he could sense things that were invisible to others, and that he moved through the mansion as if guided by an unseen hand. Some claimed that at night faint lights flickered in rooms where he had been seen wandering, and that shadows appeared to stretch and bend toward him as if seeking his attention. Even his play was peculiar. He preferred solitary games that involved patterns and symbols, and often drew complex diagrams in the dust on the floors of the mansion. He spoke to invisible companions that no one else could perceive, and sometimes laughed or frowned in response to things that were entirely unseen. His interactions with other children were minimal and awkward, and those who tried to approach him often left the mansion feeling uneasy or with a lingering sense of dread. The townspeople began to speak of him in hushed tones, warning one another that the child of the Ashfords was not like other children, and that the mansion itself seemed to protect and nurture his peculiar nature. The journals and drawings of the heir became subjects of fascination and fear within the family. Some family members attempted to decipher their meaning, hoping to understand what the boy saw and felt. Yet every attempt only deepened the mystery. His writings hinted at events that had occurred long before his birthplaces within the mansion, that held secrets and figures that no one else had ever seen. Some claimed that he had the ability to communicate with forces that were entirely beyond human understanding, and that his mind bridged the gap between the living and the unseen. As he grew older, the heir's presence became more commanding, more unsettling. His nocturnal wanderings turned into prolonged absences, and his knowledge of the mansion and its secrets seemed limitless. No one could predict where he would be or what he would do, and this unpredictability added to the air of tension that surrounded the family. Those who tried to guide him or correct him found themselves frustrated, as if he existed according to rules that were entirely his own, and not bound by the ordinary logic of the world. Legends began to form around him, whispers of prophetic dreams and warnings that he would utter in tones that chilled those who heard them. Some said he could sense misfortune before it happened, and that his presence alone could summon an uneasy calm or sudden dread. The darkness in the Ashford bloodline seemed to flow through him, amplified and focused into a force that could not be ignored. Even the family who had endured so many tragedies could not fully comprehend the nature of the child they had raised, and some began to fear that he was destined to carry the family into unknown and possibly dangerous realms of mystery. In the end, the heir of the Ashford estate became a symbol of everything the family had always represented: the mixture of wealth, prestige, mystery, and darkness. He was both the hope and the curse, a living embodiment of the peculiar power that had lingered in the mansion for generations. His life was intertwined with the shadows and the whispers of the estate, and every step he took seemed to echo with the history and secrets of those who had come before. He was the Ashford's ultimate enigma, the one through whom the family's hidden legacy might finally reveal itself, and yet he remained untouchable, unknowable, and frighteningly alone within the sprawling and silent halls of his ancestral home. The Ashford mansion itself seemed alive with secrets, its very walls carrying whispers of the past and shadows of events that no one dared to speak about. The building was immense, its corridors twisting and turning like the passages of a labyrinth, each hallway and staircase seemingly designed to confuse and disorient those who entered. The mansion was a place where even the most familiar paths could become unrecognizable after a single turn. The attics were locked and hidden away their doors, reinforced with heavy iron and sealed with layers of dust and cobwebs, as if to warn the living that some things should never be disturbed. Within these hidden spaces no one knew what might lie. The echoes of footsteps long gone seemed to linger, and the faintest whisper could make even a grown adult shiver. Hidden rooms lay behind walls that appeared solid from the outside, some revealed only when a secret lever was pulled or a hidden latch was discovered. These rooms were the subject of endless speculation among the townspeople. Tales of horrors too terrible to describe circulated in hushed voices, as no one outside the family had ever dared to enter them. Some claimed that these rooms contained relics of the past, instruments of pain or mysterious artifacts imbued with strange energies. Others believed that they were places where the Ashfords conducted rituals that must never be witnessed by outsiders. The mystery of the hidden rooms only added to the fear and fascination that surrounded the mansion, turning it into a place of legend and dread. The corridors themselves seemed to move and shift depending on who was walking them. Some servants swore that hallways would extend or contract unnaturally, that doors would appear where none had existed before, and that familiar rooms seemed to rearrange themselves overnight. The mansion felt alive in a way that defied explanation, as if the building itself were aware of the presence of those within it and was actively shaping their experience within its walls. Shadows gathered in corners and stretched along ceilings, moving in ways that did not correspond to any light source. Visitors spoke of cold drafts that followed them from room to room, and of a sense of being watched even when they were completely alone. The air inside the mansion carried a weight, a presence that pressed down on those who entered, making their hearts race and their senses hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the ancient structure. Locals whispered endlessly about what might exist behind the heavy doors and shuttered windows. Some claimed to have glimpsed shadowy figures moving silently behind glass when the mansion was supposedly empty. Others said that faint lights flickered in the windows at odd hours, though no one lived there permanently. The boldest who ventured close to the estate after sunset reported seeing silhouettes pass across the halls in ways that seemed to defy human movement. Their accounts were fragmented, yet consistent enough to leave the town in a state of perpetual unease. Even children were warned never to approach the hill at night, and grown adults felt the pull of fear in their stomachs when the mansion came into view. The mansion's gardens, though sprawling and meticulously kept, could not hide the aura of dread that surrounded the estate. Paths twisted unnaturally, and hedges formed barriers that blocked the view of certain parts of the property. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and earth, and the silence of the grounds was oppressive. The wind seemed to whisper through the trees in voices that mimicked human speech, and shadows fell across the stone pathways in patterns that were almost deliberate. The estate itself became an entity separate from the family that lived there, a living presence that influenced those who entered and maintained the secrecy of the Ashfords in ways that no force outside could penetrate. Even the furniture and objects within the mansion seemed to possess an uncanny quality. Tables and chairs appeared to shift ever so slightly when no one was looking. Doors that had been locked remained ajar, and paintings seemed to follow the movements of those who passed before them. Servants often avoided certain rooms entirely, fearing the subtle dangers that were impossible to articulate. Some whispered that these objects retained memories that interacted with the living in ways that were both subtle and unnerving, and that the mansion had a consciousness that responded to the moods and actions of its inhabitants. The mansion was also a place of sounds that could not be explained. Footsteps echoing where no one had walked, doors creaking open in the middle of the night, whispers of voices carried through the halls, and sometimes laughter or crying could be heard emanating from rooms that had been abandoned for decades. The combination of these phenomena created an atmosphere of constant tension, a place where even the most rational mind could be unsettled by the inexplicable. The Ashfords themselves moved through the house as if accustomed to these occurrences, but outsiders were often paralyzed with fear and awe. Over time, the mansion became a character in its own, right the center of stories and legends that spread throughout the town. Every new generation of villagers learned of the strange happenings, and the house's supernatural reputation grew. The estate was respected, feared, and avoided. It became a symbol of mystery and danger, a place where curiosity and courage were tested and often found wanting. Even today, the mansion stands silent, yet alive with the memory of its secrets, every brick and beam infused with the weight of centuries of unexplained events and the darkness of the Ashford family that called it home. Servants who dared to work for the Ashfords often left the mansion in a state of terror, their minds haunted by experiences that could not be explained and memories that refused to fade. They entered the estate expecting a normal life of duties and routines. Yet almost immediately they sensed something unusual, an atmosphere thick with tension and a presence that seemed to watch their every move. The halls were alive with strange noises, footsteps that echoed in empty corridors, whispers that came from nowhere, and doors that opened and closed as if moved by invisible hands. The air itself felt cold in places where warmth should have prevailed, and chilling drafts seemed to follow them no matter where they walked. These subtle but persistent phenomena created an environment where fear grew quietly in the corners of the mind, unnoticed at first, and then all-encompassing. Some servants spoke of seeing figures vanish into walls, leaving no trace behind, as if the mansion itself consumed them. The figure might appear briefly in a hallway or peek from behind a door, before dissolving into thin air and leaving only the lingering impression of something uncanny. The servants could never explain these visions, and most dared not mention them to the family or to anyone outside the mansion for fear of ridicule or worse, yet attracting the attention of the unseen forces within. Some servants refused ever to speak of what they had experienced, claiming that even talking about it brought discomfort and dread, as if recounting the story could somehow summon the same fear again. The silence that followed these confessions often felt heavier than the fear itself, and reinforced the idea that the mansion had its own consciousness, its own rules, and its own way of interacting with the living. The stories of the servants, though fragmented, combined to paint a chilling picture of a household haunted not just by misfortune and tragedy, but by something far more sinister, something that lingered in the shadows and moved through the halls like a living presence. Some claimed that they had felt hands brush against them when no one else was around, or seen shadows stretch and twist in ways that defied the logic of light and space. The mansion seemed to absorb the energy of those within it, amplifying fear and manifesting it in small but unmistakable ways. The servants became unwilling witnesses to the estate's mysteries, learning quickly that the line between reality and imagination was dangerously thin in a place like this. Even daily routines became fraught with unease. Kitchens and servant quarters carried a heavy air, as if the house itself was judging the actions of its inhabitants. Objects would move slightly from one day to the next, items on shelves misaligned, chairs askew, despite being placed carefully the night before. These small movements, though seemingly insignificant, contributed to the ever-present feeling of being watched, of never being truly alone. The servants spoke of the sensation of eyes on them, the certainty that at any moment something could emerge from the shadows to observe or interact in ways that were impossible to prepare for. The mansion taught them quickly that nothing was ordinary and that fear could be woven into the fabric of everyday life. Some of the servants claimed to have heard whispering voices speaking in languages they did not understand, and others described faint laughter or crying coming from rooms that were supposedly empty or abandoned. These sounds were not constant but unpredictable, arriving in moments when the servants were alone or distracted, and leaving them shaken and disoriented. The house seemed to communicate in its own language, using sound and movement to remind those inside that it was alive and aware. Each night became a test of courage for those who remained the walls, a living entity, recording every action and thought and responding with subtle manipulations that reinforced the impression of an intelligent and malevolent presence. The experiences of the servants varied from mild disturbances to outright terror. Some left the mansion after only a few days, unable to endure the constant strain, and others stayed for months, but were forever changed by what they had witnessed. Some claimed to have seen glimpses of the past replayed within the wall shadows of the family as they moved about centuries before, or apparitions of individuals who had long since disappeared. The mansion held these memories and seemed to animate them at will for anyone perceptive enough to notice. The combination of past and present created an environment where the line between what was living and what was spectral blurred, and where every corner could hide both danger and revelation. Ashfords themselves seemed largely unconcerned by the reports from their staff moving through the mansion, as if the occurrences were natural and expected. Their calm in the face of what terrified others added another layer of unease to the servants' experiences, and made it clear that the family understood and perhaps even participated in the subtle mysteries of the estate. The servants realized quickly that the house was an extension of the family, a place where power and fear were intertwined, and where obedience and discretion were the only safe options in the end. The servants' stories collectively created a narrative of a household unlike any other one, where the ordinary rules of reality did not fully apply, where shadows could move independently, where objects could shift on their own, and where fear became a constant companion. They left the mansion forever changed, haunted by what they had seen and heard, carrying with them the knowledge that some houses are alive in ways that defy comprehension, and that the Ashford estate was one of the most formidable examples of such a place. Their experiences were warnings for anyone who dared to enter the estate, that the Ashfords' world was not meant for the ordinary, and that some secrets were better left undisturbed. As the Ashfords' dark reputation grew, the townspeople began to avoid them entirely. The stories of disappearances, accidents, and strange occurrences surrounding the mansion spread quickly through the village, and soon the very name Ashford became synonymous with fear and unease. People crossed the street to avoid the estate and whispered in hushed tones whenever it was mentioned. Even those who had once admired the family for their wealth and influence now kept their distance, wary of what might befall anyone who ventured too close to the hill where the mansion stood. Investigations into the mansion's odd happenings were attempted from time to time by curious locals or those seeking to uncover the truth, but none ever yielded answers. The house seemed impervious to scrutiny, every door locked, every hidden passage sealed, every secret remaining just out of reach. Curiosity itself became dangerous. People who tried to explore the mansion often returned shaken or not at all. Those who did come back could rarely explain what had happened to them. They would speak of feelings of being followed, of shadows that moved against the light, of footsteps echoing in empty halls, and of glimpses of faces in windows where no one stood. It was as if the mansion had a will of its own and punished those who sought to uncover its secrets. The townspeople began to understand that the Ashfords were not merely eccentric or tragic. They were part of a story that involved forces beyond comprehension, and that the mansion itself played a role in maintaining that mystery. The legend surrounding the estate grew with each passing year. The townspeople recounted tales of fleeting figures, glimpsed in the moonlight whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and sudden chills that swept through the air without warning. Children were warned never to stray near the hill, and adults felt a sense of dread whenever they passed the estate. Even travelers and merchants who had no connection to the family carried stories of the mansion back to their own villages, tales that were half remembered and exaggerated with every retelling. Yet despite the fear, the mansion and its inhabitants continued to exert a magnetic pull on the imagination of the people. No one could ignore it completely. Some locals claimed to have seen apparitions moving silently across the grounds of the mansion at night. Shadowy figures would appear at windows or along the hallways, flickering just out of reach of vision and disappearing before anyone could confirm their presence. Others described hearing voices whispering names or warnings that made no sense, yet left them shaken to their core. Footsteps would echo through empty corridors, and doors would creak as if someone was walking unseen among the living. The estate became a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred, where fear was heightened by the knowledge that the Ashfords and their mansion held secrets that could never be fully understood. The townspeople's reactions ranged from avoidance to outright superstition. Some refused to travel past certain roads at night, or ventured only in groups with torches. To ward off the unknown, others attempted to document occurrences and map the estate. But their efforts were always met with frustration and often danger. The mansion seemed to repel attempts at understanding, as if it were actively concealing itself and testing the courage of those who sought its truths. Over time, the idea that the Ashfords were cursed and their estate haunted became a fixture of village culture, a story told around fires to warn children and remind adults that some places were not meant to be approached without caution. The family's isolation grew alongside their reputation. The Ashfords were aware of the fear that surrounded them, yet they did not seem concerned by it moving through the mansion, as if accustomed to the whispers, the glances, the rumors, and the unspoken dread that filled the town. Their presence was both commanding and unsettling, reminding everyone that while the house and the family were shrouded in mystery, they were also powerful and untouchable. It became clear that the mansion was not just a home, but a force and extension of the family itself, enforcing the secrecy and the legend that had grown around them over decades. Stories of encounters and unexplained phenomena continued to circulate. Generations of villagers learned to respect and fear the estate, avoiding it whenever possible, while still feeling the pull of curiosity that haunted human nature. Some claimed to have seen shadows of figures long dead reenacting moments from the past, while others spoke of sudden changes in temperature, a sense of being followed, and fleeting glimpses of movement in empty rooms. The mansion held within it the memories of tragedies, misfortune, and perhaps even intentional acts carried out by the family across centuries. Each observation added to the aura of dread and fascination, reinforcing the inseparability of the Ashfords' name from the fear they inspired in the end. The town and the family became intertwined in a story of mystery and terror. The mansion stood as a reminder of the unknown, a symbol of the consequences of curiosity and the weight of secrets passed down through generations. The Ashfords' legacy was no longer simply wealth or influence. It was fear and awe, a reputation cemented by events that could not be explained and experiences that could not be forgotten. Even now, the shadow of the estate stretches over the town, its presence, felt by anyone who dares to think of the family and their mansion and the stories of dread that continue to define them. Rumors spread throughout the town and beyond that the Ashfords practiced occult ceremonies, secret gatherings that had been passed down through generations, carried out behind closed doors and hidden from the eyes of the world. The stories told of rooms within the mansion that no servant dared enter, of spaces that were deliberately concealed behind false walls or locked doors that required keys known only to certain family members. It was whispered that these rooms contained mysterious symbols etched into the walls and floors, objects that seemed charged with a strange energy, and relics whose purposes were known only to the family. The very idea of these hidden rituals inspired fear and speculation and fueled the legend of the Ashford estate as a place where the ordinary rules of life did not apply. The servants and occasional visitors who spoke of these ceremonies described them as being unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Their accounts were often fragmented, contradictory, and vague, but a common thread ran through them: the impression that what took place within those rooms was deeply unnatural and beyond human understanding. Some claimed to have seen candles arranged in intricate patterns on the floors, strange sigils painted on walls, and tables laden with objects that seemed to hum with a presence that was both unseen and oppressive. Others spoke of chanting or whispered words in languages that were incomprehensible to human ears, yet carried a weight and authority that could not be ignored. The air inside the mansion during these times was said to be heavy with a feeling of anticipation, a tension that pressed down on all who were near and made even the bravest hearts falter. The atmosphere of dread surrounding the Ashfords and their estate grew from these rumors and from the uncanny experiences of those who lived within the mansion. For generations, the family maintained an air of secrecy, cultivating the impression that they were not simply a household of wealth and power, but custodians of knowledge and practices that were forbidden or dangerous. The house itself seemed to respond to these energies, the hidden rooms and long corridors acting as conduits for forces that were imperceptible to ordinary senses. Some servants claimed that objects would move or vibrate when rituals were conducted, that shadows would gather more densely in certain corners, and that the temperature would drop inexplicably, as though the mansion itself were participating in the ceremonies. Locals speculated endlessly about the purpose and scope of the Ashfords' occult practices. Some believed that the family sought to commune with spirits of the dead, others that they attempted to harness energies beyond the natural world, and still others suspected that the rituals were designed to ensure the continued power and prosperity of the estate at any cost. The secrecy surrounding these events only added to their allure and horror. The fact that no outsider had ever been permitted to observe a ritual firsthand allowed imagination to fill in the gaps, creating a narrative of danger and the supernatural that no factual account could contradict. Every story reinforced the sense that the Ashfords were different from other families, and that the mansion itself was an active participant in maintaining and amplifying their mysterious reputation. Even within the family, the rituals carried weight and expectation. The children were often aware from a young age of the significance of certain rooms, the meaning behind particular symbols, and the necessity of discretion in all matters related to these ceremonies. They grew up knowing that there were aspects of their heritage that could never be questioned, and that obedience was crucial to maintaining the balance between the visible world and the hidden forces. Their ancestors had engaged with servants were instructed to follow orders silently, never to observe more than they were permitted, and to report nothing to outsiders. Those who failed to adhere to these rules often experienced consequences that were whispered about but never confirmed, adding another layer of fear and mystery to the estate. Over time, the very idea of the Ashford rituals became inseparable from the identity of the family and the mansion itself. The hidden rooms lined with relics and symbols were no longer simply storage spaces. They were sacred spaces imbued with a history of secrecy and power. Every corner of the mansion carried a memory of past ceremonies. Every shadow seemed to hint at events that had occurred, unseen by the outside world. The atmosphere of dread that surrounded the estate was not merely the product of tragic events or unusual architecture, but a tangible presence born of generations of occult practice and the weight of unspoken knowledge. Even today, the possibility of dark rituals lingers in every tale of the mansion. The stories passed down by former servants, townsfolk, and curious travelers all carry hints of what might have occurred within those walls. The flicker of candlelight in hidden rooms, the strange patterns and symbols that vanish when one tries to examine them too closely, and the sense that the Ashfords themselves were not merely wealthy landowners, but custodians of forces that defied explanation. The mansion stands as a testament to these secrets, a silent reminder that some knowledge is dangerous and some traditions are too powerful to be ignored. The legacy of the Ashfords and their rituals continues to haunt the town, inspiring fear, fascination, and endless speculation about what truly lies within the walls of that ancient and imposing estate. Over time, wealth and status could no longer shield the Ashfords from the misfortune that seemed to follow them like a shadow. The fortunes that had once set them apart from the rest of the town began to dwindle. Debts piled up and creditors grew impatient. Yet even the pressure of financial strain could not compare to the weight of the tragedies that struck the family with unrelenting force. Isolation grew as relatives and acquaintances distanced themselves from the estate, unable or unwilling to confront the constant sorrow that seemed to define life within the mansion. The family itself became more insular, retreating into the walls of the estate and relying only on one another for comfort or guidance. Yet even this closeness could not protect them from the unseen forces that haunted their lives. The mansion that had once been a symbol of prestige and wealth slowly fell into decay. Its towers and spires began to crumble, the paint on its walls peeled and chipped, and the gardens that had been meticulously kept became overgrown with weeds and tangled vines. The hallways echoed with the ghosts of laughter and conversation long gone, and each empty room seemed to breathe sorrow into the hearts of those who remained. The floors creaked underfoot, as if the house itself mourned the loss of its former glory, and shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting across walls and ceilings, in ways that unsettled anyone who walked through the estate. The decay was not merely physical but spiritual, a reflection of the family's dwindling fortune, the tragedies they endured, and the weight of the dark legacy that had accumulated over generations. Tragedies continued to strike with merciless consistency. Children and adults alike fell victim to accidents, illnesses, and disappearances that seemed almost preordained. The servants who remained spoke in hushed tones of the strange occurrences that had intensified as the family's fortunes waned. Doors would slam shut, unbidden objects would move or vanish, and shadowy figures would be glimpsed moving along corridors where no living person could be present. The sense of dread that pervaded the mansion grew more intense over time, as if the very walls were absorbing the misfortunes of its inhabitants. amplifying them and reflecting them back in ways both subtle and terrifying. The estate had become a living repository, for the Ashfords, suffering a silent witness to every sorrow and a conduit through which the weight of the family's cursed history could manifest. The darkness of the Ashfords' history seemed to cling to every corner of the estate. Every room, every hallway, every hidden chamber bore the memory of the misfortunes that had transpired there. Even in empty spaces, the echoes of past tragedies seemed to linger, creating an atmosphere where the ordinary rules of reality felt suspended. The air carried the weight of sorrow and fear, pressing down on anyone who entered, and making the mansion feel alive, in a way that was both oppressive and inexplicable. The family themselves seemed affected by this accumulation of darkness, moving through the halls, with a heaviness that was visible in their posture, their expressions, and their interactions with one another. As wealth diminished and isolation increased, the family became more and more dependent on the mansion itself. The walls and floors seemed to hold them in a state of perpetual tension and unease. The estate that had once been a source of pride became a prison, a place where every step was haunted by the past, and every glance reminded them of what had been lost. The servants who remained often felt the presence of something greater than human sorrow, as if the mansion itself had absorbed the legacy of misfortune and now carried it forward with its own intent. The decay of the house and the decline of the family were intertwined, as if one could not exist without the other, and as if the spirit of the estate were actively maintaining the connection between material decline and spiritual. Oppression neighbors and townspeople noted the change in the estate from afar. The Ashford mansion that had once towered above the town with imposing grandeur now looked neglected and forlorn. Windows were often broken shutters hung askew, and the gardens appeared wild and untamed. The air around the estate seemed heavier, darker, and the stories of shadows moving along hallways or figures glimpsed at windows became more frequent and more vivid in retelling. The mansion had become a character, in its own right, a living embodiment of the Ashfords' history, a silent chronicler of sorrow and misfortune that had been passed down through the generations. Even in this state of decline, the mansion retained a strange power. The dark legacy of the family seemed to be concentrated within its walls, drawing the curious and the unwary and imprinting its atmosphere on anyone who ventured too close. The Ashfords were no longer simply a family defined by wealth or status. They were inseparable from the mansion itself, from the shadows that gathered in its corners, from the echoes of tragedy that reverberated through its halls. The decay of the physical structure mirrored the decay of the family and ensured that the story of sorrow, misfortune, and dark legacy would endure beyond the lives of those who had lived it. In the end, the mansion stood as a testament to the consequences of wealth lost to misfortune and to the enduring power of a family history steeped in darkness. Each room, each corridor, each crumbling wall seemed to hold a fragment of the Ashford story, a piece of the cursed legacy that had been absorbed into the very fabric of the estate. The decay was more than superficial. It was symbolic, a reminder that no matter how grand or wealthy a family might be, the weight of their own history and the darkness within could not be escaped, and that even walls built of stone and brick could carry sorrow, shadows and secrets across generations. The last known member of the Ashford family disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only questions that have haunted the town for decades. No one knows when or how it happened, whether the person simply vanished from the estate or was claimed by the same mysterious forces that had shadowed the family for generations. The disappearance sparked fear and speculation among the villagers, many of whom believed that the Ashfords' curse had finally reached its final manifestation, and that whatever dark legacy had been passed down was continuing its relentless path of misfortune. Some claimed that the family had taken precautions to hide themselves from the world, while others feared that the mansion itself had claimed the final member, as it had the unseen tragedies and vanished servants of the past. Speculation about the fate of the last Ashford gave rise to countless theories. Did the family's curse continue to exert its influence over the estate? Did they flee into the unknown to escape the weight of their history, or were their secrets too terrible to ever be revealed? The questions remain unanswered, and the ambiguity only adds to the legend of the Ashfords. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth, prestige, and fear, now became a symbol of disappearance, mystery, and unresolved terror. Its empty halls echo with the memory of all who lived and died there, and the air carries a weight of anticipation, as if the estate itself waits for someone to discover what lies hidden within. Locals still tell stories of ghostly figures glimpsed in the windows of the mansion, shadows that move independently of light or human presence, and lights that flicker in rooms long abandoned. Some say the figures are the last Ashford walking the halls, unable to leave the mansion behind. Others believe they are the spirits of generations long gone, replaying the tragedies that marked their lives. Whether ghost or memory, the effect is the same, a chilling presence that unsettles anyone who dares approach the estate. The mansion remains uninhabited yet alive, with a history so dark and a legacy so persistent that the town treats it with the caution usually reserved for dangerous or forbidden places. The grounds of the estate are largely avoided by everyone who lives nearby. Paths are overgrown and neglected gates swing on their hinges in the wind, adding to the impression of desolation and decay. The mansion itself looms on the hill, a silent sentinel, the crumbling towers and darkened windows suggesting the weight of centuries of sorrow and secrecy. From a distance, one can almost sense the energy that still emanates from the walls, a lingering reminder of the Ashfords' presence and the tragedies that have accumulated within its confines. Every rock, every tree, every shadow on the grounds carries a whisper of what occurred there, a memory of events too terrible to fully recount, and yet too vivid to be forgotten. Despite the absence of any living Ashford, the mansion exerts a pull on human curiosity, drawing the brave and the foolish alike to its gates. The stories of flickering lights, shadowy figures, and strange noises are enough to keep most at a distance. Yet, the human fascination with the unknown ensures that the legend is never forgotten. Those who have dared to approach speak of an oppressive atmosphere of dread, a sensation that the house itself is aware of their presence and observes them silently. Every step on the crumbling floors seems to echo with history and mystery. Every doorway promises both discovery and terror. The mansion, empty though it may be, remains a repository for the darkness of the Ashfords' legacy. The lingering presence within the estate suggests that some of the Ashfords' darkness remains waiting silently for the next unwary visitor to cross the threshold. Every story told by townsfolk adds layers to the legend, creating an almost tangible sense that the mansion itself is alive and aware of its own past. The ghosts, whether real, imagined, or the echoes of history, seem to linger in rooms and corridors, casting shadows that stretch unnaturally and forming shapes that appear momentarily before dissolving into darkness. The estate has become a living tale of caution, a symbol of how the weight of history, misfortune, and secrecy can persist even when the family itself has vanished. Over time, the mansion has taken on an identity separate from the Ashfords themselves. It is feared, admired, and avoided, a testament to the power of legacy and the endurance of human fascination with the unknown. The absence of the family does not diminish the influence of the estate. The stories continue to spread, and the warnings continue to be heeded. The empty halls resonate with memory, and the air itself feels heavy with the accumulated weight of generations of tragedy, supernatural speculation, and unsolved mystery. Even without a single living Ashford, the mansion has maintained its hold over the town, over the imaginations of the curious, and over the whispers of those who live in its shadow. In the end, the disappearance of the last Ashford cements the family's story as one of mystery and dread. It is a tale of wealth lost to misfortune, of power mingled with fear, and of secrets so dark that even the passage of time has not been able to bury them. The mansion remains standing, a silent witness to all that has occurred within, and a reminder that some darkness persists, some curses endure, and some secrets wait patiently for the next person to uncover them. The legacy of the Ashfords is inseparable from the estate they called home, a story written in shadows, echoes, and flickering light, and one that will continue to haunt the imaginations of all who hear it. The history of the Ashford family stands as a cautionary tale of wealth, obsession, and secrets that linger in the shadows. Their story is remembered not for simple accomplishments or acts of kindness, but for the darkness that seemed to follow them from generation to generation. The mansion that once symbolized their power and status now sits abandoned, a silent reminder of what happens when ambition and obsession are left unchecked. Though the walls are empty and the halls quiet, the estate is far more than bricks and wood. It is a monument to mysteries that time cannot erase, and a vessel that holds the echoes of every misfortune, accident, and disappearance that has ever touched the family. Generations of Ashfords lived and died under the weight of these shadows. Their lives were marked by wealth and influence, but also by tragedy and unexplained events that seemed to haunt them at every turn. The family's obsession with secrecy and control over their estate created an environment where fear could thrive unchecked and curiosity could be punished, in ways that left lasting impressions on those who dared to enter the mansion. Whether it was servants disappearing mysteriously, children wandering the halls at night, speaking to shadows, or strange noises echoing through empty corridors, the estate became a character in its own right, a living presence that shaped the lives of the Ashfords and those who served them. Though time has passed, the mansion still retains the weight of the past. The abandoned rooms hold memories of both grandeur and horror, the floors and walls steeped in the energy of every event that transpired within. Even in silence, there is a sense that the house remembers its former inhabitants, that it carries forward. The tragedies, the rituals, the disappearances, and the secrets that were never meant to be revealed. The estate is more than a physical space. It is a repository of a family's darkest impulses and the supernatural possibilities that have been whispered about for centuries. Shadows gather in the corners and flicker across walls as if responding to the history that permeates the air, creating an atmosphere that is both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Some secrets of the Ashfords were never uncovered and likely never will be. There are rooms whose contents are unknown objects, whose purpose is unclear, and events whose truth can only be speculated upon. Each generation seemed to add another layer to the mystery, weaving a complex tapestry of horror and intrigue that continues to captivate those who hear the stories. The family's life serves as a reminder that not all legacies are measured by achievements. Some are measured by the fear and darkness they leave behind, and the stories that survive long after the people themselves have vanished. The cautionary element of the Ashford story is clear. They demonstrate how wealth and status cannot protect from tragedy, how obsession can warp a family, and how secrecy can create an environment where darkness can thrive unchecked. The mansion itself is a monument to the consequences of these forces, a visible reminder that time does not heal all wounds, and that some evils linger in silence, patiently waiting to be discovered or to influence those who come too close. The estate's continued presence on the hill above the town ensures that the story of the Ashfords remains alive in collective memory, serving as both warning and fascination. Even now, the story continues to inspire fear and curiosity. Locals speak in hushed tones about the estate, the shadows that move within it, and the lights that flicker in rooms that have long been abandoned. Travelers and those who are drawn to the supernatural are captivated by the legends, and many recount experiences of unease or fleeting glimpses of figures from the past. The mansion has become more than a building. It is a symbol of enduring mystery, a physical representation of the family's dark legacy, and a testament to the idea that some secrets refuse to die with those who create them. The Ashford story reminds us that evil can linger even in silence, that what remains after a family disappears can be as impactful as the lives they lived, that wealth and status cannot insulate anyone from tragedy or the consequences of their own actions, and that some houses hold memories too dark to be ignored, too powerful to be left alone, and too persistent to fade from the consciousness of those who live nearby. The mansion stands as a silent witness to all of this, its walls whispering stories to those who listen carefully enough, its floors echoing the steps of those who came before, and its shadows carrying forward a legacy of darkness that will not easily be erased. In the end, the history of the Ashford family is inseparable from the mansion itself. Each reinforces the other, creating a narrative that is both tragic and terrifying. The estate is more than a backdrop. It is a participant, a keeper of secrets, and a repository of fear. Its presence is a reminder that human lives are entwined with the places they inhabit, and that some histories cannot be buried, no matter how much time passes. The story of the Ashfords is a warning, a fascination and a legend all at once, and it serves to remind anyone who hears it that some darkness remains long after the living have gone, and that silence does not always mean peace. The cautionary tale of wealth obsession and shadowed secrets endures because the mansion and its story continue to inspire curiosity and dread. It stands as a monument to the mysteries that time cannot erase, and as a testament to the idea that some families are remembered more for the darkness they left behind than the lives they lived. The Ashfords' legacy is woven into the walls, the floors, the shadows, and the air of the estate, and it remains a force that lingers patiently in every tale of the mansion, a presence that waits silently for those who dare to uncover its secrets.